Today, we'll check out one of the most useful TradingView indicator that you can use for price action and smart money trading. We will do a full top-down analysis and how to use it with price action. We will cover many concepts in this video. Breakers, order blocks, imbalances, equal highs and lows, ranges. We have so much to do. If you're ready, let's do it. Welcome our free trading course, all about price action trading strategies and smart money concepts. If you love scalping and day trading or even swing trading, check out my free trading course. You can find the links on Google Drive or directly from my website, which is in the description. And please try to watch videos in order to fully understand everything. Let's talk about one of my favorite indicators that helps my price action trading analysis. It is a very common indicator, I am sure you know it, the volume profile. Now this indicator comes with paid TradingView subscription. However, there are also free alternatives in the public section. Do not worry, all of them work the same way, free or paid. Any of them are more than enough for our trading purposes. But I need to make a warning first. I never use any indicator for buy or sell purposes. All the indicators I use are only for helping me analyze the charts faster and saves my time. Never ever buy or sell with an indicator. So, what is this indicator for? Unlike the classic volume bars at the bottom, which show you a single candlestick volume action, this indicator helps us to identify accumulating orders and trading activity at certain price levels. Yes, you heard it right, accumulating orders at a price level. What does it remind you of? Yes, the ranges. I use indicator mostly for quickly identifying the ranges. Settings of the indicator actually are extremely simple. Most of the settings are just for visuals. I set the row size and volume area to 100. For the style, I use light gray and the rest of the settings is disabled. I only need the main volume indication and that's it. Now, how to use this indicator? We'll look at a practical example soon. However, let's first focus on the basics. I want you to notice the shape on the right. Looks like a mountain. So, the middle and the highest point is called HVN, high volume node, and also called as POC, point of control. Whatever you want to call them, remember all the names and terms are useless. Focus on the price action. This helps us to identify the range EQ point. The small volume pockets on the top and the bottom are called LVN, basically low volume nodes, used for range high and low identification. So basically, volume profile will give you the power of identifying ranges in the early stages. However, it is not 100% accurate, but it gives you rough estimates of where the EQ, range high, and the range low zones are. The rest is up to you to identify the perfect range. You just need to adjust the range due to our range rules. Quite simple and straightforward. Now, I will analyze the charts first and make a stop to explain what is what. Let's start with the S&P 500 futures. So you can see, price action just works everywhere, whatever you trade. Crypto, Forex, stocks, futures. Let me play it a bit and later on I'll comment on it. Now, as you can see, our volume profile starts to shape itself. It gives us a clear mountain shape. Orders are accumulating at the center. I do not know yet if it is a valid or good range. I need to see more to confirm it. Let's see. As you can see, I have a perfect range here, very clear to trade. Now I have confirmed the range, all thanks to the volume profile, which helped me to identify the range EQ, range high, and the range low. Let's continue. Now, what I did here is extremely simple. I look for imbalances and liquidity. That's it. Range is already giving me a bias. What can I do, long or short? Imbalances and liquidity points, especially the equal highs and lows, shape my trading decisions. Let's open lower time frames and see what we have. Now, at this point, I have a massive equal high, and right above it, that is the major 4-hour imbalance, our most favorite trade setup. And at the bottom, we have a great imbalance to fill with open liquidity points. What gives me the bearish bias is the range high and the equal high sweep with the imbalance touch. We are getting facts, more and more confirmation to be bearish. Let's move on. Now you can see that we have another major imbalance below in 15 minutes. All these imbalances increase the bearish bias for us. Let's move on to see how can we enter this trade. Now, let's talk about this trade a bit. What do we have here? What kind of confirmation we got here? As for entry, 4-hour imbalance touch, major equal highs hunt, strong reaction to the 4-hour imbalance, range high area, 3-tap concept, small imbalance leftovers in 15 minutes, pullback to deep premium. Now for the target. 4-hour major imbalance, 15-minute imbalance, open liquidity zones, range low to aim. As you can see, what we can achieve with price action is limitless. Indicators like volume profile can help us to analyze the charts much faster. But I need to warn you again, I never use any indicator for buy-sell purposes. Turn on indicators, do your analysis, and turn them off. Never place an entry from an indicator. Okay folks, I hope this indicator will improve your speed of analysis for the price action trading. As always, all these trading methods are suitable for scalping, day trading, or even swing trading. I believe that it will be really helpful in your trading life. I hope you subscribe to the channel and like the video. Thank you, please take care and see you soon.